The auditorium was packed that morning, filled with the restless noise of hundreds of students waiting for the school's annual talent show to begin. Bright banners hung from the ceiling, and the stage lights flickered as teachers hurried around trying to keep things in order. In the corner near the backstage curtain stood a girl, holding her trembling hands together, trying to calm her racing heart. She had signed up weeks ago to play the piano. It wasn't because she wanted attention or fame. It was because music was the only thing that made her feel alive. But as the day got closer, whispers began to spread through the school halls. Some students laughed, saying she wasn't good enough. Others rolled their eyes, claiming she just wanted sympathy. By the time her turn finally came, she had already heard every cruel joke possible. From where she stood, she could hear the audience laughing and clapping for the last performer, a group of boys doing a funny dance. The crowd loved them. She tried to smile, but her stomach turned. The teacher in charge gave her a quick nod, signaling that she was next. She felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. When her name was announced, a few students whispered loudly and someone snorted. She pretended not to notice. Her shoes felt heavy as she walked to the stage, each step echoing in her ears. The bright lights hit her face, and for a moment she couldn't see anything but a blur of shadows and outlines. She found the piano at the center of the stage, a large black instrument that had seen better days. One of the pedals was loose and a few keys were chipped. Still, to her it was beautiful. She sat down, but her fingers wouldn't stop shaking. The audience's murmurs grew louder. A boy in the front row whispered something to his friend, and they both laughed. Her face burned. She wanted to disappear, but something deep inside told her to stay. She took a slow breath, trying to steady her hands on her lap. The host of the event gave her an encouraging smile from the side of the stage. But even that couldn't drown out the mocking giggles from a group of girls in the back. One of them whispered, "This is going to be a disaster." She looked down at the keys, their white and black colors glowing under the spotlight. For a moment, memories flashed through her mind. Long nights at home when she practiced quietly while everyone slept. Moments when the piano became her only friend. She remembered the old music book her grandmother gave her, filled with faded notes and torn pages. That book had taught her more about feeling than any teacher ever could. The MC's voice faded as the hall went quiet, waiting for her to start. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Her throat tightened, but she took one more breath and placed her fingers gently on the keys. And then, just as she was about to begin, someone in the back shouted, "Hope she knows where middle C is." The audience laughed and a few students clapped mockingly. The sound cut through her like a knife. Her shoulders tensed and her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. She wanted to run off the stage, to never look back, but something inside her refused to let go. She thought about her grandmother's voice, soft but firm. "When you play, don't think about them. Just listen to your heart. It knows the music better than anyone." So she closed her eyes. The crowd quieted, perhaps waiting for her to fumble or give up. She sat there for what felt like a full minute, breathing in and out. Slowly, her mind went quiet. The laughter faded from her thoughts, and all she could hear was the faint hum of the stage lights above. Her fingers moved slightly, touching the smooth surface of the keys like she was greeting an old friend. But before she could play, the teacher backstage whispered to another, worried that the silence meant she'd frozen. The host took a step forward, ready to check if she was okay, but just then her fingers began to move. The first note rang out softly, so soft that some students leaned forward to hear. The sound floated through the hall like a whisper, pure and trembling. For a moment, even the ones who had laughed grew quiet. It wasn't a perfect beginning, but it carried something honest. She didn't play from a sheet of music. She played from memory, from emotion, from the hidden parts of her heart. But before she could lose herself in the song, one of the lights flickered, and she flinched. A few giggles rose again, and she could feel her chest tighten. She forced herself to keep going, playing a few uncertain chords before stopping again. The laughter came back stronger this time, sharper. Someone whispered, "Told you she can't play." Her throat burned, and her fingers curled into fists. For a split second, she thought about walking off the stage, pretending the piano was broken, saving herself from more humiliation. But as she lifted her hands to her lap, her eyes caught the reflection of the stage lights on the piano's surface. It reminded her of the nights she'd played alone, when no one was watching. when it wasn't about impressing anyone, just about feeling something real. She exhaled deeply. She could still leave, but that would mean letting them be right, and she had worked too hard for that. So she straightened her back and placed her hands back on the keys. Her heartbeat slowed, and a strange calm settled inside her. The laughter still echoed in the background, but she no longer cared. She pressed the first key again, this time firmer, louder. The sound was clearer now, strong, confident. The second note followed, then the third, forming a pattern she knew by heart. She didn't play the song the way it was written. She played it the way she felt it. Every mistake, every hesitation became part of the story. The more she played, the less she noticed the crowd. Her body began to move with the rhythm, her fingers flowing naturally over the keys. The sound filled the hall, pushing back the whispers and laughter, leaving nothing but the music. From backstage, one of the teachers stood frozen, watching her. The students who had mocked her slowly stopped talking, unsure of what was happening. The song was building, and there was emotion in every note. Sadness, strength, defiance. It was the sound of someone refusing to be broken, but this was only the beginning. She was still nervous, still unsure if she could make it to the end without faltering. The room was heavy with silence now, but she could feel the weight of every eye on her. Her palms were sweaty and her heart raced, but she kept going, determined to finish what she started. As she neared the end of the piece, her fingers slipped slightly, producing a soft, wrong note. For a moment she froze, but instead of panicking, she turned that mistake into part of the melody, smoothing it out like it was meant to be there. The students who had been waiting for her to fail didn't even notice. All they could see was a girl completely lost in her music. The final note lingered in the air for a second before fading into silence. She didn't look up right away. She didn't know if anyone would clap or if the laughter would return. Her chest rose and fell with each deep breath as she sat there, her hand still resting on the keys. She had done it, not perfectly but honestly. For a moment the hall was completely still, and then from somewhere in the back someone clapped once, then twice. The sound echoed softly at first, then grew louder as a few others joined in. It wasn't a full applause, not yet, but it was enough to tell her she hadn't failed. She stood up slowly, her knees trembling. She gave a small nod, unsure what to do with her hands. The teacher backstage smiled, relief washing over her face. As she stepped off the stage, she felt lighter than she had all morning. Behind her, the piano sat quietly in the spotlight, as if it had shared her secret with the world. She didn't know what the audience truly thought of her performance, and maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was that she stayed, she played, and she didn't let their laughter define her. And though she didn't realize it yet, what had just happened on that stage would change everything that followed. When she walked off the stage, her heart was still pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. Her hands were shaking, and she couldn't tell if it was from fear or relief. The sound of a few claps still echoed in her mind, faint but real. It wasn't much, but for her it meant everything. She had faced the crowd. She had played. She didn't run away. Backstage, one of the teachers smiled softly and said, "You did well, dear. You were brave." That word, brave, stayed with her as she sat down on an old bench behind the curtain. Brave. She had never thought of herself that way. She wasn't confident, she wasn't popular, and most of the time she preferred to stay quiet. But maybe today she had shown a different side of herself, even if only for a few minutes. The sound of the next performer's music drifted in from the stage. The crowd had gone back to its usual loudness, cheering and clapping for others. For a moment it felt like her small performance had been forgotten already. She told herself it didn't matter. But a small part of her hoped someone had really listened. Not just heard the notes, but understood what she was trying to say through them. After the show ended, students poured out of the hall in noisy groups. She stayed behind, packing her small bag slowly, trying not to draw attention. A few people glanced at her as they passed. Some said nothing. Others gave her quick, polite smiles. Then unexpectedly, a girl she didn't know very well walked up and said quietly, "That was actually really nice." She didn't know what to say. She just nodded and smiled, whispering, "Thanks." It was a small moment, but it warmed her heart. When she got home later that evening, the house was quiet. Her parents were still at work, and her younger brother was at a friend's house. She dropped her bag on the couch and went straight to the piano in the corner of the living room. It was old and slightly out of tune, but it was hers. She touched the keys gently and played a few soft notes. The sound filled the empty room, and she felt the tension in her chest ease. The day had been harder than she expected. The laughter, the whispers, the fear, it all came back when she closed her eyes. She had been so close to giving up on that stage. She could almost hear that cruel voice again from the crowd. Hope she knows where middle C is. She pressed the keys harder, letting out a sharp sound, almost angry at herself for caring so much. But then she remembered the feeling when she played the last few notes, that small spark inside her that refused to die out. That was the part she wanted to hold on to. Her grandmother's photo sat on the shelf above the piano. She looked at it and whispered, "I did it, Grandma." It made her smile. Her grandmother had always believed in her, even when no one else did. She had once said, "The world won't always clap for you, but that doesn't mean you stop playing." Those words made more sense now than ever before. Over the next few days, things at school were strange. Some people acted like nothing had happened. A few of the classmates who had laughed at her avoided her eyes. And then there were others, ones she never spoke to before, who came up to her in the hallway just to say they liked her performance. It surprised her how quickly opinions could change. Still, not everyone was kind. One boy joked loudly in the cafeteria that she must have practiced 100 times just to play one song right. His friends laughed and she felt her stomach twist. But instead of running away, she lifted her tray and walked to another table without saying a word. It still hurt, but she was learning how not to let it destroy her. After school, she began spending more time in the music room. The teacher who had helped organize the event noticed her there one afternoon and smiled. "Back again?" the teacher asked. She nodded shyly. "That's good," the teacher said warmly. "You have something special in you. Don't hide it." That simple encouragement meant more than the applause. It gave her a quiet kind of confidence, one that didn't need to be loud or visible. She started practicing new songs, experimenting with different melodies. Sometimes she stayed until the sun began to set, the empty classroom glowing orange in the late afternoon light. She didn't always play perfectly, but every note made her feel more like herself. One day, as she was leaving the music room, she overheard two students talking outside. "Did you see that video of her performance?" one of them said. Her heart stopped. "Yes, someone posted it online," the other replied. "I thought she'd mess up, but she's actually really good." Her breath caught. Someone had recorded her? She didn't know whether to feel scared or excited. She hurried home that evening and searched online. Sure enough, she found it. A video of her playing on stage titled simply with her name and school talent show. The comments were few but kind. Some said her playing was beautiful. Others said it made them feel something they couldn't describe. She watched it again and again, not because she wanted to admire herself, but because it didn't feel real. That was her up there, the girl who had almost run away, the one everyone had doubted. Yet in the video she looked calm, lost in her own world. It didn't show the fear she felt, only the music. And somehow that made her proud. A few days later, her music teacher showed her a message from another school. They were organizing a regional student showcase, and one of the judges had seen her video online. They wanted to invite her to perform again. Her first reaction was panic. The thought of standing on another stage in front of strangers made her heart race. But then she remembered that moment when the audience had gone silent, when even her biggest doubters had stopped laughing. She couldn't let fear stop her again. She agreed to go. The following weeks were filled with preparation. She practiced after school every day, sometimes staying late into the evening. Her teacher helped her polish the song, encouraging her to add her own touches. "Don't just play the notes," the teacher reminded her. "Play your story." And that's what she did. At home, she kept it a secret from most people. She didn't want the pressure or the gossip. Her parents knew, though, and they supported her quietly, proud but careful not to overwhelm her. Her mother even tuned the piano properly for her, saying, "If you're going to do this, do it right." As the day of the regional showcase drew closer, her nerves grew stronger, but so did her excitement. She could still remember the sting of humiliation from before, but this time she carried it differently. It didn't make her weaker. It reminded her how far she'd come. On the morning of the event, she woke up early. The sky was still pale blue and the air smelled fresh after a night of rain. She took her time getting ready, choosing a simple outfit, not wanting to stand out too much. She looked at herself in the mirror and whispered, "You can do this." When she arrived at the auditorium, it felt bigger than anything she'd ever seen. There were students from other schools, each with their own instruments, each looking confident. She felt small again, but she reminded herself that everyone had to start somewhere. Her teacher greeted her warmly and introduced her to the judges. They smiled kindly, and one of them said, "We're happy to have you here. We saw your performance online. It was beautiful." She could hardly believe it. They had seen her. The same performance that had once felt like a failure was now opening doors she never imagined. When her turn came, she walked onto the stage with slower, steadier steps. The lights were bright again, but this time she didn't flinch. She took her seat at the piano, closed her eyes for a moment, and breathed deeply. The audience waited quietly. She began to play. The music flowed out of her hands effortlessly, each note carrying emotion, memory, and truth. This wasn't about proving anyone wrong anymore. It was about sharing something real, something she had held inside for too long. The melody filled the room, wrapping around everyone like a story told without words. When she finished, there was a pause, just like before. Then came the applause, louder, stronger, filled with genuine admiration. She smiled softly, feeling her heart swell with gratitude. This time there were no whispers, no laughter, only respect. As she walked off the stage, her teacher was waiting with tears in her eyes. "You did it," she said quietly, and the girl finally believed it. She had turned her humiliation into strength, her fear into art. She didn't know where music would take her next, but one thing was certain: she would never let anyone's laughter silence her again. After the regional showcase, her life started to change in ways she never expected. The performance that once terrified her had become the turning point she didn't see coming. The judges had praised her deeply, saying she had something rare, an emotional connection to music that couldn't be taught. She didn't fully understand what that meant, but it made her feel like she finally belonged somewhere. When she returned to school, things were different. People greeted her in the hallways, smiled at her, and even stopped to talk. The same classmates who once whispered behind her back now asked questions about her performance. "How long have you been playing?" one asked. "That was amazing," said another. It felt strange at first, like living in a dream. She was still shy, still quiet, but now when people looked at her, it wasn't with pity or laughter. It was with respect. Even the boy who once mocked her in the cafeteria walked up to her one afternoon. He looked awkward, scratching the back of his neck. "Hey," he said, "I saw that video again. You were really good." She didn't know what to say, so she just nodded and smiled politely. For the first time, she didn't feel small in front of him. Her teacher noticed the change, too. "You've grown," she said during practice one day. "You play differently now, more confident." It was true. Something inside her had shifted. The fear that once made her hands tremble before touching the keys was fading. When she played now, she felt free. Soon more invitations started to come. A nearby community center asked her to perform at a charity event. Then a local radio station wanted to feature her in a short interview about young musicians. Each opportunity made her nervous, but she accepted them all. She had learned that fear only had power if she listened to it. The night of the charity performance, she arrived early. The small hall was filled with families, children, and older couples waiting for the show to begin. It wasn't as big as the school or regional events, but to her it felt just as important. She sat at the piano, quietly warming up, when a little girl came up to her and said, "I want to play like you one day." She smiled softly. "You will," she said. "Just keep practicing." The girl grinned and ran back to her seat, holding her mother's hand. That tiny moment touched her heart. She had never thought anyone would look up to her like that. When her turn came, she took the stage and began to play a new piece she had been working on for weeks. It was slow and gentle, a song that carried both sadness and hope. She could feel the audience listening, not just hearing the notes, but feeling the emotion behind them. When she finished, the applause was warm and genuine. It wasn't the loudest she'd ever received, but it was the kind that came from people who truly appreciated her music. After the event, the organizer approached her with a kind smile. "You have a gift," she said. "You play with heart, not just hands. Keep doing that and you'll go far." That night, as she walked home under the streetlights, she couldn't stop smiling. The cool air brushed against her face, and for the first time she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. But even as things got better, there were still challenges. Success didn't erase the doubts that sometimes crept in. There were days when she felt tired, when the pressure to live up to people's expectations felt heavy. Some classmates still whispered that she got lucky, that it was just a phase. Others started competing with her, trying to outshine her in every performance. She tried not to let it bother her. Instead, she poured her feelings into her music. The piano became her voice, the one place she could speak freely. Whenever life felt overwhelming, she would sit down and play until her thoughts grew quiet again. One afternoon, while practicing in the music room, her teacher brought in a visitor, a man from a small music academy in the city. He listened quietly as she played, not saying a word. When she finished, he smiled and said, "You play like someone who feels every note. Have you ever thought about taking professional lessons?" She hesitated. The thought of studying music seriously scared her. It sounded like a dream that belonged to other people, not someone like her. "I'm not sure I could," she said softly. But he shook his head. "You already have the hardest part, the passion. The rest can be taught." He left his card with her teacher and said the academy was offering scholarships to talented students. That night, she showed the card to her parents. They were proud, but cautious. "It's a big step," her father said. "But if this is what you love, we'll support you." Her mother smiled, adding, "You've already shown what you can do when you believe in yourself." She applied for the scholarship a week later. The process wasn't easy. There were forms to fill, auditions to record, and essays to write. She doubted herself many times, wondering if she was good enough. But every time she sat at the piano, the music reminded her why she started. It wasn't for fame or praise. It was because playing made her feel alive. When the letter finally arrived, her hands trembled as she opened it. Her heart raced when she read the first line. "Congratulations, you have been selected for the City Music Academy Scholarship Program." She screamed softly, covering her mouth in disbelief. It felt unreal. The same girl who once stood trembling on a stage, afraid of laughter, was now being recognized for her talent. The first day at the academy was overwhelming. The building was large, filled with students from different schools and cities. Some had been playing since they were toddlers. Their skill intimidated her, but she reminded herself she had earned her place too. Her new teacher, a gentle older woman, welcomed her warmly and said, "Music is not about being perfect, it's about being honest." She threw herself into practice, learning new techniques and pieces. Some days were exhausting. She made mistakes and grew frustrated, but her teacher always encouraged her to keep going. "Every wrong note teaches you something," she would say. Slowly, her playing became more polished, her confidence stronger. Months passed, and the academy prepared for a grand concert where students would perform in front of professional musicians and local press. When her name was listed among the performers, she felt both honored and terrified. It would be the biggest stage of her life. The night before the concert, she couldn't sleep. She sat by the piano in her room, staring at the keys. So many memories came rushing back. The laughter from her first school show, the trembling hands, the first applause. Every step had led her to this moment. Her parents attended the concert the next evening, sitting proudly in the front row. The hall was filled with people dressed elegantly, their eyes fixed on the stage. She waited backstage, her heart thudding just like it had during her very first performance. The difference now was that she wasn't afraid of the audience anymore. She was ready to share her story again through music. When her turn came, she walked out calmly, her head held high. She sat at the grand piano and took a deep breath. The first notes she played were soft and gentle, like a whisper. Then, as the melody grew, her hands moved with emotion and control. She poured her heart into every sound, telling the world everything she had felt, the pain, the doubt, the small victories. The music filled the grand hall, and for a moment, she forgot everything else. She wasn't the girl who had once been humiliated. She was the girl who rose from it, who turned pain into something beautiful. When the last note faded, there was silence, deep and respectful. Then applause erupted, loud, long, and full of admiration. She looked up, eyes glistening as people stood to their feet. Her teacher was smiling proudly, her parents clapping with tears in their eyes. In that moment, she realized something important. Every time she played, she wasn't just performing, she was healing herself and maybe even others. As she walked off the stage, a quiet joy filled her heart. She didn't need fame or trophies to know she had succeeded. What mattered most was that she had found her place in the world. And it all started with that one moment when she refused to give up. That night, lying in bed, she whispered softly to herself, "They laughed once, but now they listen." And with that thought, she smiled, knowing her journey was only beginning. After the grand concert, life at the academy settled into a steady rhythm. Every day was filled with lessons, practice sessions, and new challenges. She was learning things she had never even imagined. Music theory, composition, and performance skills that pushed her to her limits. But she loved every moment of it. Each day felt like a step closer to the dream she never knew she had. Her teachers noticed her dedication. She wasn't the most experienced student, but she was the one who worked the hardest. She arrived early, stayed late, and practiced until her fingers ached. Sometimes the janitor would find her still playing long after everyone else had gone home. The quiet hallways echoed with her melodies, soft but full of emotion. Still, not everything was easy. The academy was filled with talented students. Some had been playing since childhood with private tutors and family connections in the music world. A few of them didn't take her seriously. They whispered that she didn't belong, that she was just a lucky girl who went viral once. At first, she tried to ignore them, but their words stung more than she wanted to admit. One afternoon, during a rehearsal, a student made a sarcastic comment after she made a small mistake. "Guess the internet fame doesn't teach real technique," he said with a smirk. A few others laughed. Her cheeks burned, but she said nothing. She just nodded politely and went back to practicing. She didn't argue. She knew her music would speak louder than her words ever could. That night, she stayed late in the practice room again. Her teacher had given her a new, very difficult piece, a classical composition that required not just skill, but deep emotion. She struggled through the first few pages, frustrated when her fingers didn't follow the way her mind wanted them to. She sighed heavily, rubbing her hands. The room was silent except for the ticking of the old wall clock. After a while, she closed her eyes and began again, slower this time. The notes started to flow smoother, gentler, as if the piano understood her exhaustion. Somewhere between those notes, she found herself remembering her past. The laughter from that first show, the humiliation, the silence that came after. Those memories didn't hurt as much anymore. Instead, they reminded her how far she had come. When she finally looked up, it was almost midnight. Her eyes were tired, but her heart felt light. She knew she was getting better, not because of talent alone, but because she refused to stop. A few weeks later, the Academy announced an important event, a student recital where guests from the city's biggest music school would attend. It was a chance for students to be noticed by professionals, maybe even earn scholarships or invitations for higher studies. Everyone was excited and nervous. When the performance list was posted, her name was near the bottom. She wasn't surprised. Most of the top spots went to the more senior students, but she didn't mind. For her, this was another opportunity to grow, to share what she loved. She worked harder than ever in the days that followed. Her teacher helped her refine every movement, every pause, every emotional shift in the music. "Don't just play what's written," the teacher told her. "Play what's inside you." The day of the recital arrived, and the academy buzzed with energy. The auditorium was filled with parents, teachers, and visiting musicians. The lights shone bright on the polished grand piano at the center of the stage. She sat quietly backstage, her hands resting on her lap, listening to the other students perform. Each piece was brilliant, technical, and perfectly executed. But when her turn came, she wasn't thinking about perfection anymore. She was thinking about connection. She walked onto the stage slowly, the spotlight soft against her face. For a moment, the crowd looked huge and her heart skipped a beat. But she remembered her grandmother's words. "When you play, the world disappears." So she sat down, closed her eyes, and let her fingers find their place. The first note rang clear and gentle. The audience grew quiet. She played with grace and emotion, her hands moving effortlessly. The music rose and fell like a heartbeat, sometimes soft and fragile, sometimes powerful and full of strength. She wasn't playing someone else's story anymore. She was playing her own. By the time the final note faded, she felt tears in her eyes. The silence that followed was heavy, meaningful. And then applause filled the room. Real applause, sincere, full and warm. Her teacher stood up, clapping proudly. Even the students who once mocked her looked surprised. A few of them nodded respectfully, realizing they had underestimated her. After the recital, one of the guest musicians, a well-known pianist from the city's top conservatory, approached her. "You play beautifully," he said. "You don't just play the notes, you tell a story. Have you ever thought about composing your own music?" She was caught off guard. "I've written little pieces before," she admitted, "but nothing serious." He smiled. "You should. You have a natural way of expressing feelings through sound. Not everyone can do that." He gave her his card and told her to reach out if she ever wanted guidance. That night, she couldn't sleep. The pianist's words echoed in her head. Composing. She had always played other people's music, pieces from the great masters. But what if she tried to create something of her own? Something that carried her voice? She started small. A few chords, a simple melody, something soft and full of emotion. She didn't think too much about structure or rules, she just played what she felt. The melody that came out was gentle but deep, like a whisper carrying memories. She worked on it every day after classes, adding small changes, trying new ideas. After a few weeks, she had her first real composition. She called it "The Light Beyond the Rain." It told the story of her journey from pain and fear to courage and hope. When she played it for her teacher, the older woman listened quietly, then smiled with tears in her eyes. "This," she said softly, "is your voice." Word about her piece spread quickly through the academy. Soon, other students wanted to hear it too. Some even asked her how she came up with such emotional melodies. She simply said, "I just played what I felt." For the first time, she realized that her music could reach people in ways words never could. The academy decided to feature her original piece at the next concert. It was rare for students to perform their own compositions, but everyone agreed that her song deserved to be heard. She was nervous, of course, but this time, the nerves felt different. They weren't the kind that made her want to hide. They were the kind that made her want to shine. When the concert night came, the hall was packed. Her parents sat near the front, smiling proudly. Her teacher stood beside the stage, giving her a reassuring nod. The moment she sat down at the piano, a calmness washed over her. She began to play. The melody unfolded softly like a memory. Each note carried a piece of her story. The laughter, the tears, the moments of silence, the nights of doubt. The music built gently, then soared like a quiet victory. The audience listened in silence, completely drawn in. When she finished, there was a long pause before the applause came. It started softly, then grew until everyone was standing. Her parents were crying. Her teacher's face glowed with pride. Even the students who had once mocked her were cheering. She stood and bowed, her heart full. She had shared a part of herself, and the world had understood. Later that night, as she sat alone at the piano, she thought about everything that had happened, from that first humiliating performance at school to this moment of triumph. The journey had been long, full of pain and doubt, but also full of growth. Every challenge, every setback had shaped her into who she was. She smiled softly and played the opening notes of her song again, whispering, "This is just the beginning." The months that followed the concert were filled with new opportunities and challenges. She had grown used to traveling to different events, performing in front of larger audiences and meeting people who cared deeply about music. Every new stage she stood on felt like a test, but also a chance to express herself. She had learned that fear was just a sign that she was about to grow, and she no longer let it control her. One afternoon, her teacher approached her with exciting news. A music festival in the city was looking for young performers to showcase original compositions. It was a big event, with people coming from other states and even some international guests. "They want to hear your music," her teacher said. "They loved the recordings of your piece. This could be your chance to make a mark." Her heart raced. The thought of playing in front of so many people was thrilling but also terrifying. She remembered her first performance back at school, the embarrassment, the fear, the almost overwhelming urge to run. Yet she also remembered the feeling after finishing that piece, the calm, the pride, the understanding that she had something to say. She took a deep breath. This was a chance to share her story again, in a bigger way. The next few weeks were intense. She spent hours every day refining her composition, adding layers, experimenting with dynamics and practicing transitions. Some days she felt like she would never get it right, and the frustration sometimes made her want to quit. But each time she sat down at the piano, she reminded herself why she was doing it. It wasn't for fame, money, or applause, it was for the music itself. Finally, the day of the festival arrived. She stepped into the hall and felt its immensity. The stage was enormous, the lights bright and dazzling, and the audience looked like a sea of faces stretching far back. Backstage, performers from all over were tuning instruments, adjusting music sheets, and practicing in last-minute nerves. She felt small but also alive. This was the place she had worked so hard to reach. Her teacher gave her a reassuring smile and whispered, "Remember, this is your voice. Let it flow." She nodded and took her seat at the piano. The audience quieted as the MC introduced her. For a brief moment, she could feel her heart racing faster than ever. Then she closed her eyes and let her hands find the keys. The music began, softly at first, delicate as a whisper, carrying the weight of memories and emotion. She played the melody she had crafted with care, pouring all the feelings of doubt, struggle, courage, and hope into each note. The room seemed to hold its breath as the music flowed over the audience. Her nerves dissolved, replaced with a focused serenity. She wasn't thinking about anyone watching, only the story she wanted to tell. When she reached the climax of her composition, the music swelled with strength and beauty. She could see the audience leaning forward, captivated. The room was completely silent except for the sound of her piano. Even when she made a minor slip, she seamlessly turned it into part of the performance. Each mistake became part of the story, each note a brushstroke painting her journey. When the final note lingered in the air and faded away, the hall was silent for a heartbeat. Then applause erupted, louder and more heartfelt than she had ever heard. Standing ovations came from all directions, and she felt her chest swell with emotion. Tears blurred her vision, not from fear or frustration, but from the overwhelming sense of accomplishment and connection. She had faced her fears, shared her heart, and the audience had felt it. After the performance, many people approached her, complimenting her skill and the emotion she conveyed. A few asked for her sheet music, curious to see how she had composed such a moving piece. One older woman, a well-known composer, shook her hand and said, "You have a rare gift. Keep playing and creating. You are destined for great things." Her words made her heart skip. This was the recognition she had only dreamed of, and it felt both humbling and empowering. That night, lying in bed after returning home, she thought about the journey she had taken. From that first day at the school talent show, trembling under the gaze of mocking students, to performing in front of respected musicians and a captivated audience, it all seemed like a lifetime ago. She realized that every struggle, every moment of fear had led her to this point. Without those experiences, she wouldn't have the depth, passion, or courage that now defined her music. In the following weeks, more invitations arrived. She was asked to perform at smaller recitals, private events, and even local television spots. Each opportunity brought its own challenge, but also a chance to refine her skills and expand her reach. She started composing new pieces, experimenting with different styles, blending classical influences with her own emotional expressions. Her music began to develop a signature style, one that made people feel deeply and personally connected. Through it all, she never forgot her roots, the small auditorium, the laughter that once humiliated her, and the trembling hands on that first piano. Those memories reminded her to stay grounded and humble. She knew that talent alone was not enough. Perseverance, empathy, and honesty were what truly made her music resonate with others. One afternoon, her teacher suggested something unexpected. "Why don't you try teaching a workshop for younger students?" she asked. "You've grown so much, and your story could inspire others." She hesitated. The idea of speaking in front of children and teaching them was intimidating. She was used to performing, not instructing. But after some thought, she agreed. The workshop was held at a local community center. A group of young students gathered around, eager but nervous. She began by sharing a small part of her journey, the fear, the humiliation, and how she found her courage. Then she demonstrated a few techniques on the piano. The children listened intently, eyes wide, absorbing every word and movement. By the end of the session, she had taught them a short melody. One by one, the students tried playing it, stumbling over the notes, laughing and learning together. She guided them patiently, celebrating their small successes. When it was over, the children gathered around to thank her. "I want to be like you when I grow up," one said shyly. She smiled, feeling a warmth she had never experienced from performing alone. This was different. It was teaching, inspiring, and connecting on another level. That evening, reflecting on the day, she realized that her music was no longer just about herself. It had become a bridge, a way to touch lives, encourage others, and bring joy. Every performance, every composition, every workshop reinforced the power of sharing what she loved and believed in. The girl who had once been humiliated, whose courage had been tested by mocking peers, had transformed her fear into strength and her passion into purpose. She understood now that challenges weren't obstacles to stop her. They were opportunities to grow and to prove to herself that she could overcome anything. As she prepared for the next festival, the next recital, and the next composition, she carried that knowledge with her. She had learned that the world might laugh, doubt, or underestimate you, but with perseverance, courage, and honesty, it could also listen, understand, and celebrate. And she knew deep in her heart that her journey was only beginning. Every note she played, every melody she created, and every story she shared would continue to define her, shape her, and inspire those around her. As she stepped into the next chapter of her journey, she felt a sense of calm excitement she had never known before. The girl who had once been humiliated, mocked, and silenced was now someone who could walk into any room, sit at any piano, and tell her story without fear. Her music had become more than a personal escape. It had grown into a force that connected people, inspired young learners, and gave her a purpose beyond herself. The Music Academy was now bustling with opportunities. There were workshops, recitals, and collaborations with other young musicians from different cities. Each event was a chance to push her limits, to explore new styles, and to challenge herself creatively. She spent long hours composing new pieces, experimenting with melodies, harmonies, and rhythms. Each day, the piano became more than an instrument. It was a companion, a confidant, and a canvas for her emotions. One afternoon, she received a letter from a prestigious international music competition. It was an invitation to compete in a youth category, performing both her original composition and a classical piece. The thought of traveling, facing judges from around the world, and playing on a massive stage made her heart race. Fear crept in momentarily, but she remembered all the stages she had survived: the small school auditorium, the regional showcase, the city festival, and how she had turned each challenge into a triumph. Her parents and teacher supported her decision wholeheartedly. "You've worked too hard to let fear stop you now," her teacher said. "This is another step to show the world what you can do." She nodded, feeling both nervous and thrilled. She had learned that growth often came with discomfort, and that courage didn't mean never being afraid. It meant acting despite the fear. In the weeks leading up to the competition, she poured herself into preparation. She refined her original composition, practiced classical pieces she had once considered impossible, and rehearsed stage presence. Every day brought new lessons: how to project emotion, how to manage nerves, how to connect with the audience. Some evenings, exhaustion made her doubt herself, but then she would sit at the piano and remember her journey, the laughter she endured, the first applause she ever received, and the moments when her music finally silenced the room. That memory alone was enough to keep her going. When the day of the competition arrived, she stepped onto the grand stage of an international concert hall. The size of the venue was intimidating, but she focused on the music, not the audience. She adjusted the piano bench, took a deep breath, and let her hands rest on the keys. The hall was silent, waiting. She began with her classical piece. Her fingers danced across the keys with precision and emotion. Every note was deliberate, every movement practiced and purposeful. As she played, she could feel the energy of the audience, musicians, judges, and attendees, absorbing the depth and beauty of her interpretation. When the final note faded, there was a moment of profound silence, as if everyone was holding their breath. Then the applause erupted, warm and appreciative, but she knew the real test was still ahead. Next, she performed her original composition. This was her heart, her story, her voice. She poured every ounce of emotion, every memory of struggle, every triumph she had experienced into the melody. The music flowed naturally, rising and falling like waves, soft and gentle in some places, powerful and commanding in others. She felt every emotion in her fingertips, and the audience responded. Some closed their eyes, swaying to the rhythm, completely immersed. Others leaned forward, captivated by the story told without words. By the time she reached the final chords, she felt a wave of relief and fulfillment. She had done it. She had shared herself fully, completely, without hesitation. When the final note echoed and faded into silence, the hall erupted into applause, thunderous, heartfelt, and unending. People rose to their feet, cheering and clapping with admiration. Her chest swelled with emotion as tears welled in her eyes. The girl who had once felt invisible and powerless was now commanding attention with her music alone. After the competition, the judges approached her. They praised her technical skill, her emotional depth, and the authenticity of her composition. One judge said, "You don't just play music, you live it. That is rare even among seasoned professionals." Another added, "Your journey has shaped your music, and it speaks to the audience in a way that is unforgettable." Her heart thumped with pride and gratitude. All those moments of fear, doubt, and humiliation had led to this pinnacle of achievement. The award ceremony came later that evening. She received recognition for both her technical excellence and originality in composition. Standing on the stage, receiving applause from an international audience, she thought back to the girl who had trembled before her first school performance. She had come so far, and yet this was only the beginning. In the weeks following the competition, she was invited to speak at schools, music academies, and community events. She shared her story not to boast but to inspire. She wanted other young people to understand that setbacks and humiliation didn't define them, and that courage and perseverance could turn fear into opportunity. Each story she shared, each melody she played, touched hearts and encouraged aspiring musicians to pursue their dreams. Her own compositions continued to evolve. She began writing pieces that told stories of hope, resilience, and the quiet strength found in overcoming obstacles. Sometimes she would sit for hours experimenting with harmonies and rhythms until the music felt just right. Her teacher encouraged her to record and share these pieces online, where people from all over could listen. Slowly, her music began to reach a wider audience, resonating with people who found comfort, inspiration, and joy in her melodies. Despite all the recognition, she remained humble. She remembered her journey from that first humiliating experience to becoming an accomplished musician. She knew the importance of staying grounded, of remembering the moments that shaped her. She spent time mentoring younger students at the academy, teaching them not only technical skills but also the courage to believe in themselves, the patience to grow, and the joy of creating music from the heart. One evening, after a long day of practice and teaching, she sat at the piano in the quiet of her room. The keys glowed softly under the dim light. She played a new composition she had been working on, one that told the story of her journey, from humiliation to triumph, from doubt to confidence. As the notes filled the room, she felt a profound sense of peace. Every struggle, every tear, every sleepless night had been worth it. Her music had transformed her pain into something beautiful, something that could touch others. She smiled, thinking about the countless young musicians who might hear her story and feel inspired. She realized that her journey had never been just about winning competitions or earning recognition. It had been about finding her voice, embracing her passion, and using it to make a difference. The girl who had once been laughed at had grown into a young woman whose music could move people across the world. Her dreams continued to expand. She imagined traveling to new cities, performing in concert halls filled with thousands, and composing music that would be remembered long after she played it. But she also knew that no matter how far she went, she would never forget the lessons learned from that first performance. The fear, the courage, the determination to rise above humiliation. As she closed the piano lid that night, she whispered to herself, "This is only the beginning." She understood that life would bring new challenges, new stages, and new moments of doubt, but she also knew that with music in her heart and courage in her soul, she could face anything. The girl who had once been humiliated had become a force of inspiration, proving that true strength comes from embracing your fears, following your passion, and never letting anyone else define your worth.